Hi there. Welcome to Dreamy Histories channel. Tonight, we're stepping into the humid dawn of a Mayan city where your biggest morning worry isn't hitting snooze on your alarm. It's whether that rustling outside your thatched hut is just the wind or a 200-pound jaguar deciding you look like breakfast. Picture yourself right now, lying on a woven mat that's doing absolutely nothing to cushion you from the packed dirt floor. As the pre-dawn darkness pulses with sounds that would make your modern suburban nights seem like sensory deprivation chambers. You're about to discover that in this sophisticated civilization that gave us advanced mathematics and astronomy, you probably wouldn't survive past lunch without offending a god, breaking a taboo, or becoming someone's ritual offering. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're getting cozy, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing our dreamy community spanning the globe, from midnight in Mumbai to afternoon naps in New York. Now let's drift back in time. The first sensation that hits you isn't gentle. It's the suffocating humidity that makes breathing feel like inhaling soup. Your eyes snap open in the darkness, and for a moment you can't remember where you are. Then it all comes flooding back. You're in Palenque, jewel of the classic Maya civilization, somewhere around 700 CE. And that rhythmic pounding that just shattered your sleep isn't your neighbor's bass-heavy playlist. It's the massive drums atop the Temple of Inscriptions, their obsidian-sharp beats announcing that the sun god is beginning his daily journey across the underworld ceiling, which you know as the sky. Your body protests as you shift on your sleeping mat, every joint stiff from a night on the ground. The ancient Maya certainly mastered astronomy, architecture, and agriculture, but comfortable mattresses? Not so much. The nobility might have raised sleeping platforms, but you're just a commoner, a farmer who grows maize for the elite, and your bed is essentially a yoga mat made from woven plant fibers that smell faintly of mildew and strongly of the countless bodies that have sweated on it before you. Through the gaps in your hut's walls, because yes, your walls have gaps, ventilation being more important than privacy when you live in a tropical sauna, you catch the faintest hint of grey creeping across the sky. But your attention is yanked back to ground level by a sound that makes your blood freeze, a low, guttural cough that definitely didn't come from anything human. Jaguars, the lords of the night, the ancient Maya revered them as divine creatures, associates of the underworld, shapeshifters who could cross between the world of the living and the dead. Historians still debate whether the Maya actually believed their shamans could transform into jaguars, or if this was metaphorical. But right now, with that cough getting closer, you're not particularly interested in academic discourse. You're interested in not becoming what the Maya poetically called meat for the spotted one. You lie perfectly still, barely breathing, as padded feet move past your hut. The jaguar isn't hunting you, not tonight. It's probably heading back to the jungle after a night of stalking the deer that come to raid the outlying maize fields. But the message is clear. You're not in Kansas anymore. Dorothy, you're in a world where apex predators treat your neighborhood like their personal highway, and there's no animal control to call. As the danger passes, other sounds fill the pre-dawn air. Howler monkeys begin their territorial screaming matches in the canopy above, a sound that would make even the most aggressive car alarm seem melodious. Macaws shriek their morning hellos, and underneath it all, you hear the splash and gulp of crocodiles in the nearby river, probably fighting over whatever unfortunate creature wandered too close to the water's edge in the darkness. The temple drums intensify their rhythm, and you know you need to get up. In your world, being late might mean a passive-aggressive email from your boss. Here, being late for your agricultural duties could mean a beating, enslavement, or worse, being selected as a volunteer for the next ceremony where the gods demand fresh blood to keep the cosmos running smoothly. The Maya took punctuality seriously when the alternative was cosmic collapse. You stumble out of your hut into the pre-dawn gloom, your stomach already growling, and immediately step into something that squelches unpleasantly between your toes. Could be mud, could be something deposited by the turkey-like birds that roam freely through the residential compounds. You decide not to investigate too closely. Some mysteries are better left unsolved, especially before you've eaten. Speaking of eating, your nose catches the smoke from cooking fires starting up throughout the neighborhood, and your mouth waters in anticipation. Then you remember what actually constitutes breakfast in this time and place, and that watering turns into something more like dread. See, the ancient Maya had a saying, "We are the people of maize." What they didn't mention was that they were the people of maize for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and every snack in between. If you're expecting variety, you're about to be more disappointed than a kid who discovers the tooth fairy pays in cryptocurrency. You make your way to the communal cooking area where your wife, because gender roles here are about as flexible as obsidian, is already grinding corn on a metate, that flat stone surface that's basically a prehistoric food processor powered entirely by female elbow grease. The rhythmic scraping of stone on stone mingles with the sounds of other women preparing the day's first meal, their quiet conversation punctuated by the occasional slap as someone swats away one of the countless insects that consider human sweat a breakfast invitation. "The atole is ready," your wife says, handing you a gourd filled with thin, watery corn gruel that looks like someone tried to make oatmeal but gave up halfway through. This is your coffee, your orange juice, your breakfast smoothie, all rolled into one profoundly unexciting package. The good news? It's warm. The bad news? It tastes like liquid disappointment with a hint of limestone, because that's what they use to process the corn. But wait, today's a special day. Your wife produces another small gourd with the air of someone revealing a gourmet surprise. Inside, you see what looks like moving rice. Your modern sensibilities recoil as you realize those aren't grains, they're bee larvae. Escamoles, the ancient Maya called them. Though historians still argue whether this term was borrowed from later cultures or originally Mayan, what isn't debatable is that insect protein was a delicacy, reserved for special occasions or when you needed extra energy for hard labor. The merchant said they're fresh from yesterday's hive raid, she says proudly. You watch the pale larvae squirm and try to channel your inner Andrew Zimmern. In your time, people pay premium prices for protein powder. Here, protein comes with legs, or in this case, the promise of future legs if you don't eat them quickly enough. You take a tentative bite. The texture is, let's call it challenging, sort of creamy, sort of crunchy, with a nutty aftertaste that isn't entirely unpleasant if you can get past the knowledge that you're eating baby bugs. The ancient Maya considered this a treat on par with what you might think of lobster or caviar. Then again, they also thought dental modification was the height of fashion, so maybe their judgment isn't entirely trustworthy. Around you, other families are tucking into their morning meals with gusto. One neighbor adds dried chili peppers to his atoll, creating a spicy breakfast drink that would probably kill in modern Brooklyn for about $12 a cup. Another family shares a handful of ramon nuts, ground into a paste that actually tastes pretty good, like a cross between coffee and chocolate, which makes sense since the Maya basically invented the concept of chocolate drinks, though theirs contained no sugar and enough chili to make you question your life choices. A few of the wealthier families, you can tell by their jade ear ornaments and the fact that their children aren't visibly malnourished, are enjoying additions to their morning spread that make you genuinely jealous. Slices of papaya drizzled with honey from the stingless bees the Maya cultivated, small fish wrapped in leaves and roasted over the fire. One particularly well-off household even has turkey eggs, a luxury that required either excellent hunting skills or enough cacao beans to trade for them at the market. Ah yes, cacao beans. In your world, money doesn't grow on trees, but here it literally does. The Maya used cacao beans as currency, which led to some interesting economic situations. Imagine paying for groceries with something you could also grind up and drink. It would be like if Starbucks gift cards were legal tender. A turkey egg might cost you 10 beans, a small jade bead 30, and a slave. Well, that's a conversation for later when we get to the market. Your 5-year-old son stumbles out of the hut, rubbing his eyes and immediately demanding food. Your wife hands him a smaller gourd of atole and a corn cake that's about as soft as a hockey puck. He gnaws on it without complaint, because he doesn't know that somewhere in the future, children will turn their noses up at anything that isn't shaped like a dinosaur and covered in processed cheese. The priest took another family from the Eastern District. Your neighbor mentions casually, the way you might comment on the weather, for the rain ceremony next month. Your blood chills despite the morning heat. Being taken for ceremony is the Maya equivalent of winning a lottery, where the prize is meeting the gods personally, which sounds great until you realize it's a one-way ticket. But you nod and continue eating your bee larvae like this is perfectly normal breakfast conversation, because here it is. You finish scraping the last of the bee larvae from your gourd, trying not to think about how they felt going down, when your wife starts fussing with your appearance. "You can't go to the fields looking like that," she mutters, producing a cloth that might have been white sometime during the early classic period, but now resembles something you'd use to clean your car's engine. She dabs at the corners of your mouth, straightens your loincloth, yes, that's your entire wardrobe for the day, and critically examines the jade stud in your left ear. Fashion in ancient Maya society isn't just about looking good, it's about not dying. Wear the wrong color, the wrong pattern, the wrong accessories, and you might find yourself having a very uncomfortable conversation with the local authorities, where uncomfortable means potentially fatal. The Maya had more fashion rules than a modern private school, except their dress code violations came with consequences that made detention look like a spa day. Your basic outfit consists of exactly 2 items: the aforementioned loincloth, called an X, and a square cloth mantle that drapes over your shoulders like the world's most minimalist cape. Both are made from cotton that your wife spent countless hours spinning and weaving on a backstrap loom, creating fabric one painstaking thread at a time. The X wraps between your legs and around your waist in a configuration that took you months to master without creating an inadvertent tourniquet situation. The mantle is decorated with simple geometric patterns that mark you as a farmer. Nothing fancy, nothing that suggests you're trying to rise above your station. "Remove that feather," your wife suddenly hisses, plucking a small blue plume from where it had gotten tangled in your hair. "Do you want the priest to think we're impersonating nobility?" She's not being paranoid. The ancient Maya took sumptuary laws, rules about who could wear what, more seriously than modern fashion police take runway violations. certain colors were restricted to specific social classes. The famous Maya blue, that brilliant turquoise shade that makes archaeologists swoon. Commoners like you couldn't wear it without consequences that started at public humiliation and escalated to ritual sacrifice. Quetzal feathers, with their iridescent green shimmer, were so exclusively royal that even looking at them too long might get you in trouble. Your neighbor walks by wearing his work clothes, and you notice the fresh scars on his shoulders. Last month, he made the mistake of wearing a jaguar tooth necklace he'd found in the forest. Never mind that it was probably from an animal that died of old age decades ago. Jaguar anything was reserved for nobility and high-ranking warriors. The authorities gave him 20 lashes and confiscated the tooth. He was lucky. Historians still debate whether the Maya practiced the death penalty for sumptuary violations. But the contemporary records suggest that repeat offenders didn't get many chances to offend a third time. The really frustrating part is that the rules keep changing. What was acceptable last year might get you flogged this year, depending on which priest is in charge and what the current political situation demands. It's like trying to keep up with social media algorithms, except instead of losing followers, you lose skin. Your wife finishes her inspection by checking your teeth. The Maya considered dental modification high fashion, filing teeth into points, drilling holes to insert jade or obsidian inlays, even extracting teeth to create specific patterns. You still have all your teeth, but they're filed into what the Maya considered an attractive T-shape, a procedure you endured as a teenager that made modern dental work look like a gentle massage. The filing was done with stone tools and no anesthesia, unless you count the pulque, fermented agave juice, they gave you beforehand, which didn't so much numb the pain as make you too drunk to care as much. Open, your wife commands, and you obediently display your modified chompers. She nods approval. Your teeth might not have fancy inlays. Those require wealth you'll never possess. But at least they're properly shaped. In your world, people pay thousands for veneers. Here, beauty means taking a stone file to perfectly healthy teeth until they look like a broken saw blade. Down the path, you spot one of the local nobles emerging from his plastered house, and the contrast with your appearance is like comparing a peacock to a pigeon. His X is made from cotton so fine it's almost translucent, dyed with cochineal to achieve a deep red that would cost you a year's wages. His mantle is a masterpiece of weaving, decorated with complex patterns that tell stories of his lineage and achievements. Jade ornaments dangle from his ears, nose, and lower lip, so much jade that he probably clinks when he walks. But the real showstopper is his headdress. Quetzal feathers fan out in a green aurora, mixed with macaw plumes in screaming scarlet, and the black and white striped feathers of the ocellated turkey. The whole construction is so elaborate that he has to duck to get through doorways, and you suspect he needs a team of assistants just to put it on each morning. It's supported by a framework that includes jaguar skin, jade medallions, and what might be human scalps, though from this distance you prefer to believe they're just very realistic wigs. His skin tells another story of class distinction. While you're burned brown from working in the fields, his skin is pale, almost ghostly, from a lifetime spent in shaded courtyards and covered palanquins. The Maya associated pale skin with divinity and nobility. The less sun exposure, the higher your status. Some nobles even painted themselves with white clay to enhance the effect, creating a look that would fit right in at a modern goth club if you added some eyeliner and angst. The sun is climbing higher now, painting the limestone buildings in shades of pink and gold that would make Instagram influencers weep with envy. And you need to get moving. Your commute to the agricultural fields doesn't involve sitting in traffic or scrolling through your phone on public transport. It involves navigating a network of canals in a dugout canoe while trying not to become breakfast for the local wildlife. You make your way down to the canal system, where dozens of other farmers are already loading their tools into narrow boats carved from single tree trunks. The ancient Maya might not have invented the wheel for practical use. They knew about it, but apparently decided it wasn't worth the hassle in jungle terrain. But they were absolute masters of water transportation. These canals, hand-dug over generations, connect every part of the city like aquatic highways, carrying everything from building materials to human waste, hopefully not in the same boats. Your canoe is about as stable as a political promise, requiring constant balance adjustments to keep from tipping. You've seen what happens to farmers who take an unexpected swim. Best case scenario, they emerge covered in algae and smelling like a swamp. Worst case, they emerge missing pieces, courtesy of the crocodiles that patrol these waters like scaly tax collectors, taking their pound of flesh from anyone careless enough to offer it. "Watch for Itzam," calls out another farmer as he poles past, referring to the massive crocodile that's been lurking near the third bend. The Maya believed crocodiles were earthly manifestations of cosmic monsters, which seems like a really elaborate way of saying terrifying death machines. This particular specimen has been nicknamed after the creator deity, which tells you everything you need to know about its size and temperament. You push off from the muddy bank, your wooden pole sinking into the canal bottom with a squelch that releases bubbles of swamp gas. The smell hits you like a physical force, rotting vegetation mixed with human waste and the distinctive musk of crocodile. In your time, this would violate about 17 different health codes. Here, it's just Tuesday. The canal is already busy with morning traffic. Merchants pole past with canoes loaded so heavily they ride barely above the waterline. One carries cages of exotic birds, their squawks adding to the general cacophony. Another transports pottery, the delicate vessels cushioned with Spanish moss that's probably hosting its own ecosystem of insects. A third merchant's boat is filled with what looks like bundles of bark paper, but smells like death warmed over, probably codices being transported to the scribal schools, the smell coming from the deerskin glue used in their construction. You navigate carefully around a floating market that's set up at a canal intersection. Women in canoes loaded with produce call out their wares: fresh iguana eggs, still warm, honey from the sacred hives, chili peppers that will make you see Kukulkan. That last one isn't hyperbole. The Maya cultivated peppers so hot that modern ghost peppers would consider them overachievers. Historians still debate whether these extreme peppers were primarily culinary or had ritual uses, possibly in vision-inducing ceremonies. All you know is that you accidentally bit into one last year and spent 3 days convinced you could speak to the rain god. A noble's barge glides past, propelled by 4 slaves whose expressions suggest they'd rather be literally anywhere else. The noble himself reclines under a canopy of woven palm fronds, fanned by attendants with massive feather fans that probably cost more than your house. His barge is decorated with carved stelae depicting his ancestors' glorious deeds, which mostly seem to involve ripping hearts out of enemies and offering them to various gods. It's like having your family photos on your car. If your family photos showed great-grandpa performing ritual dismemberment, human teeth, fresh pulled, shouts a merchant whose dental-themed inventory makes you unconsciously run your tongue over your own modified teeth. The Maya used human teeth in jewelry, ground them up for medicine, and even embedded them in weapons. This particular merchant has them sorted by type: incisors, molars, canines, like the world's most disturbing bead shop. You try not to think too hard about where he sources his inventory. The canal narrows as you approach the Chinamampas, the famous floating gardens that aren't actually floating at all. These agricultural marvels are raised beds built in shallow water, created by piling up layers of mud and vegetation until they form permanent islands. Historians still argue about whether the Maya invented this technique or borrowed it from other Mesoamerican cultures, but whoever came up with it deserves a Nobel Prize in ancient engineering. Each Chinampa is about as long as a modern basketball court, but much narrower, separated by canals just wide enough for a canoe to pass. The exposed mud is black and rich, fertilized by canal muck and human waste in a recycling system that would make modern environmentalists proud if they could get past the hygiene issues. Willow trees planted along the edges send their roots deep into the water, holding the artificial islands together like organic rebar. You spot movement in the water beside a chinampa and freeze. A crocodile, easily 12 feet long, glides past your canoe close enough that you could count its teeth if you were suicidal enough to try. Its eyes, reflecting the morning sun like amber mirrors, fix on you for a heart-stopping moment before it apparently decides you're too skinny to bother with and continues on its way. Your pole shakes in your hands as you resume paddling, acutely aware that you're navigating in a predator's living room. You finally reach the agricultural fields where you work, still trembling slightly from your crocodile encounter, and tie your canoe to a wooden post that's seen better centuries. The workday ahead promises to be about as enjoyable as a root canal performed with obsidian tools, which, coincidentally, is a real thing here that you've been fortunate enough to avoid so far. Your supervisor, a middle-ranking official whose title roughly translates to counter of cornstalks and beater of lazy farmers, is already strutting around like a rooster who's discovered energy drinks. He wears a cotton tunic that marks him as management, actual clothing beyond a loincloth being the ancient Maya equivalent of a corner office, and carries a wooden staff that serves the dual purpose of measuring tool and attitude adjuster. "You're late," he barks, despite the fact that the sun has barely cleared the temple tops. In the Maya world, late is a flexible concept that basically means any time I decide you should have been here earlier. He makes a mark on his bark paper ledger, probably noting your tardiness for future reference when it comes time to select volunteers for special duties. Special duties. That's what they call it when someone needs to help with temple construction, assist in ritual preparations, or, God forbid, serve as an attendant during the more intense ceremonies where attendants have a disturbing tendency to become participants. The Maya might have given us zero and sophisticated astronomy, but their HR department left something to be desired. You grab your tools from the communal storage hut, a wooden digging stick hardened in fire, a stone hoe that weighs approximately as much as a small child, and a woven basket that will eventually hold whatever produce survives the jungle's attempts to reclaim it. The Maya hadn't discovered metal tools yet, which means farming here is basically CrossFit training with a side of potential death. Your assigned plot today borders the jungle, which is both good and bad news. Good because the soil is rich from centuries of decomposing forest matter. Bad because the jungle doesn't recognize property lines and sends regular ambassadors in the form of jaguars, snakes, and army ants that can strip a field or a farmer faster than you can say, "Kukulkan, save me." As you start working, the physical reality of Maya agriculture hits you like a stone axe to the skull. This isn't pastoral farming with happy peasants singing in the fields. This is back-breaking labor in suffocating humidity, fighting against soil that turns to concrete in the dry season and swamp in the wet season. Every stroke of your hoe sends shockwaves up your arms. Sweat pours off you in rivers, immediately replaced by more sweat in nature's cruelest perpetual motion machine. Around you, other farmers work in similar misery, though some have learned to find small pleasures where they can. One man chews coca leaves, not for recreational purposes, but because they numb the pain and suppress appetite. Crucial when your lunch break might consist of whatever insects you can catch. Another worker has trained a small monkey to sit on his shoulder and eat the mosquitoes that cloud around his head, though the monkey's aim isn't perfect, and occasionally it grabs a chunk of ear instead. Blood for the maize, your supervisor announces, producing an obsidian blade that glints like crystallized midnight. Oh good, you think. It's that time again. The Maya believed that blood sacrifice was necessary to ensure good harvests, and while the nobles offered their own blood in elaborate ceremonies out here in the fields, it's more of a practical arrangement. Everyone lines up to have their earlobes pricked, letting a few drops fall onto the freshly planted seeds. The historical debate about how voluntary these blood offerings were seems pretty academic when you're standing in line watching the blade get progressively duller and dirtier with each farmer it cuts. When your turn comes, the supervisor jabs with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely enjoys his work. The pain is sharp but brief, and you watch your blood disappear into the dark soil, supposedly feeding the maize god who lives underground and needs regular snacks of human essence to keep the crops growing. Next full moon, we'll need a deeper offering, the supervisor mentions casually as he wipes the blade on his already stained tunic. The Ahor has decreed that each field must provide one worker for the harvest ceremony. Your blood, already dripping from your ear, seems to freeze in your veins. Harvest ceremony workers don't come back. They go to the temple, participate in rituals that would make modern horror movies look like children's programming, and then their bodies are distributed according to strict religious protocols. The heart goes to the gods. The head might end up on a skull rack. And the limbs, well, there are reasons why the Maya word for human flesh translates literally as food of the gods. You bend back to your work, trying to look both productive and utterly essential to the farming operation. Around you, other workers are having the same thought, suddenly developing an intense focus on their agricultural duties. One man starts singing a work song praising the supervisor's wisdom and generosity, while another begins pulling weeds with the dedication of someone who's discovered their life's calling in field maintenance. The morning drags on in a blur of sweat, blood, and barely controlled panic. You plant maize in the traditional way, poking holes with your digging stick, dropping in 3 seeds, one for the birds, one for the insects, one to hopefully grow, and covering them with soil that's been mixed with ash from burned vegetation. It's actually a sophisticated agricultural system that maintains soil fertility without modern fertilizers. But right now, you're less interested in sustainable farming practices and more interested in sustainable not dying practices. The sun reaches its zenith, transforming the humid air into an almost solid substance that you have to actively push through with each movement. Your supervisor calls for the midday break with all the enthusiasm of someone announcing a tax audit, and you stumble toward the shaded area where workers gather to eat whatever they've managed to bring or forage. Your lunch consists of cold corn cakes that have achieved the consistency of roofing tiles and a gourd of water that tastes like it's been filtered through a sandal. But today, one of your fellow farmers produces something special from his carrying cloth, a small clay pot sealed with beeswax. "My cousin's a beekeeper," he says with the air of someone revealing state secrets. "Got this from the sacred hives." He breaks the seal, and immediately you smell it. Honey, but not just any honey. This is from the stingless bees the Maya cultivate, the ones that feed on the morning glory vines that wind through the jungle canopy, the same vines that contain compounds that modern chemists would recognize as powerful psychoactives. The bees concentrate these compounds in their honey, creating nature's own consciousness-altering condiment. "Just a taste," he warns, dipping a wooden stick into the golden substance, unless you want to spend the afternoon talking to the Bakabs, the Bakabs, for those keeping track of Maya deities. And you better be, because forgetting to honor the right god at the right time has serious consequences. Are the 4 gods who hold up the corners of the sky. They're generally chill as deities go, but probably not who you want to be hallucinating about while trying to avoid accidentally sacrificing yourself with farming implements. You take a small lick of the honey. It's sweet, floral, with an aftertaste that seems to shimmer on your tongue. Within minutes, the edges of your vision start to soften. The jungle sounds, birds, insects, the distant howl of monkeys, blend into a symphony that suddenly makes perfect mathematical sense. You look at your hands and notice for the first time how the lines on your palms mirror the irrigation channels in the fields, how everything connects to everything else in patterns that... "First time," laughs another farmer, his pupils dilated to the size of cacao beans. "Wait until you see the geometric patterns in the maize leaves. The gods write their messages there, you know. Last week, I spent 3 hours watching a butterfly because I was convinced it was explaining the movement of Venus. This might sound like recreational drug use, but historians still debate whether psychoactive honey was primarily religious, medicinal, or just the Maya way of making agricultural labor bearable. What's certain is that altered consciousness was woven into the fabric of Maya life, like the threads in their textiles. From the morning glory seeds the priests consumed to the fermented balshe bark that flowed at festivals. The Maya had more ways to adjust their reality than a modern Instagram filter collection. Your supervisor, apparently immune to irony, chooses this moment when half his workforce is mildly tripping to announce the afternoon's special task. "The priests need volunteers to collect rubber for the ball game next month," he says, producing a list that was definitely not random despite his claims. You, and you. His finger stabs at workers like an accusatory lightning bolt. "Report to the latex grove. You're one of the volunteers. Because of course you are. Collecting rubber means making cuts in the Castilla elastica trees and waiting for the latex to ooze out, all while trying not to disturb the various creatures that consider these trees home. It's like being a very specialized janitor in a very hostile apartment complex. The walk to the rubber trees takes you deeper into the jungle, where the canopy blocks out most of the sunlight and the air hangs heavy with moisture and menace. Your perception, still slightly skewed from the honey, makes every shadow seem significant. That vine looks exactly like the feathered serpent Kukulkan. That pattern of fungus on the tree trunk clearly spells out tomorrow's weather in ancient script. That rustling in the undergrowth is definitely just a bird and not a jaguar stalking you, despite what your enhanced pattern recognition is screaming. The rubber trees stand like ancient sentinels, their bark already scarred from previous harvests. You make diagonal cuts with your obsidian blade, watching the white latex blood emerge and trickle down into the collection cups. The Maya discovered rubber processing centuries before anyone else, mixing the latex with morning glory juice to create bouncing balls for their ritual games. They also made waterproof clothing, which would be more impressive if wearing rubber in this humidity didn't turn you into a walking sweat lodge. "Careful with that one," warns another collector, pointing to a tree where fresh claw marks score the bark at jaguar height. "Something's been marking territory." Great. As if hallucinating mildly while handling sharp objects in a jungle wasn't challenging enough. Now you have to worry about becoming a territorial dispute. You work faster, trying to fill your quota before whatever made those marks decides to check on its property. The latex has to be processed quickly before it hardens, so you head to the preparation area where workers are already heating ceramic pots over fires. The process involves cooking the latex while adding the juice from morning glory vines, the same ones that make the honey psychoactive, because apparently the Maya believed in maximum efficiency when it came to consciousness-altering plants. The smell of cooking rubber fills the air, acrid and chemical, cutting through even your honey-altered perception. Workers roll the thickening latex into balls, some small for children's games, others regulation size for the ritual ball game where losing means more than just bruised pride. You help roll one ball, the rubber warm and pliant under your palms, and try not to think about how this exact ball might be used in a game where the captain of the losing team offers his head to the gods. By the time you finish with the rubber collection, the honey's effects have mostly worn off, leaving you with the disturbing clarity that you're about to witness one of the Maya's most famous cultural contributions to human civilization. A ball game where the stakes are literally life and death. Your supervisor, apparently deciding that today's theme is traumatize the workforce, announces that all farmers must attend this afternoon's practice match at the nearby ball court. You've seen the ball court before. A long, narrow alley with sloping walls, looking like a giant skateboard half-pipe made of stone. The acoustic design is so perfect that a whisper at one end can be heard clearly at the other, which will be great for hearing the exact moment when someone's ribs crack from a 6-pound rubber ball traveling at skull-crushing velocity. The players are already warming up when you arrive, and warming up apparently means demonstrating why modern athletes are soft. These men, wearing only leather hip yokes that look like avant-garde girdles and padding on their forearms and knees, are built like stone sculptures that decided to come alive and make everyone else feel inadequate. Their bodies are covered in scars from previous games, creating a roadmap of past injuries that would make a modern insurance adjuster weep. "Practice match," your fellow farmer scoffs. "Tell that to the losers." He's got a point. The Maya didn't really do friendly competition. Even practice games could result in selection for sacrifice if the priest decided the gods were feeling peckish. The ball game, which historians still argue about naming, Pit, Poktapok, Ulama, was less sport and more religious ritual with athletic components, and a disturbing amount of metaphorical death symbolism that occasionally became non-metaphorical. The rules seem simple enough. Keep the solid rubber ball in play without using your hands or feet. What this translates to in practice is grown men hurling themselves around a stone court, using their hips, shoulders, and heads to smash a ball that weighs as much as a bowling ball but bounces like a super ball on steroids. It's like volleyball designed by someone who really hated the players. The practice begins with a ceremony. Of course it does. Everything in Maya life involves a ceremony. A priest burns copal incense while chanting in a language so archaic that even native Maya speakers look confused. He's invoking the hero twins, mythological ball players who defeated the lords of the underworld in a cosmic game. No pressure on today's players to live up to that standard. The ball is blessed, probably asking it to please not kill anyone today. And the game begins. The sound of rubber hitting flesh echoes off the stone walls like drum beats. You watch one player take a ball to the chest with such force that he flies backward, landing hard on the stone court. He gets up, wheezing, and continues playing because apparently having functional lungs is optional in this sport. The ball ricochets off the sloped walls at angles that seem to violate physics. Players dive, roll, and leap with the desperation of men who know that losing could mean more than just disappointment. One spectacular play involves a player essentially backflipping to hit the ball with his hip, sending it screaming toward the stone ring mounted high on the wall, the Maya equivalent of a basketball hoop. If basketball hoops were positioned to be nearly impossible to score through, and getting a ball through one ended the game immediately. My brother played once. The farmer next to you mentions quietly, scored through the ring. They made him a noble on the spot. Of course, the losing team's captain fed the gods that same day, but my brother got a nice house out of it. The casual way he mentions human sacrifice makes your skin crawl. But this is the reality of Maya sports. Victory brings glory, wealth, and status. Defeat brings a one-way trip to the afterlife. Though at least you go knowing you're feeding the gods and maintaining cosmic balance. It's like the ultimate participation trophy. If participation trophies involved having your heart removed while it's still beating. You notice the gambling happening around the court's edges. Maya nobles bet everything from cacao beans to slaves on these games. One particularly intense nobleman is wagering his daughter's marriage prospects on a specific player's performance, which seems like the kind of thing that would make family dinners awkward. Sorry, honey. Daddy bet your future on a ball game and lost. Hope you like that toothless farmer from the outer districts. The practice intensifies. Players slam into each other with the enthusiasm of people who've confused sport with warfare. Blood flows from scraped knees and split lips. One player's hip yoke cracks from the force of a particularly brutal ball strike, and he has to retire from the game. In your time, he'd get an ice pack and a participation award. Here, he'll probably be checking the priest's sacrifice schedule with considerable nervousness. The sun is getting lower, casting long shadows across the court. The ball becomes harder to track in the changing light, leading to more missed hits and more bodies slamming into stone. You realize this is intentional. The Maya often played games at sunset, adding the challenge of shifting visibility to an already impossible sport, because apparently, regular difficulty wasn't sufficient for people who filed their teeth for beauty. A younger player, probably in his first season, takes a ball to the side of his head. The sound it makes, like a melon being dropped onto concrete, makes everyone wince. He wobbles, stumbles, and collapses. The game doesn't stop. Players simply navigate around his unconscious form while attendants drag him to the sideline. He'll either wake up with a concussion that makes him see double for weeks, or he won't wake up at all. Either way, the game continues. The ball game finally ends when the sun dips too low to distinguish the ball from the shadows, though not before two more players are carried off the court with injuries that would require immediate emergency surgery in your time, but here will be treated with herbs, prayers, and hope. You shuffle away from the court with the other farmers, grateful that your job only involves potential death by jaguar, crocodile, or sacrifice, not by recreational rubber projectile. The walk to the market takes you through the residential district, where the smells of evening cooking fires mingle with less pleasant aromas from the drainage ditches. Your stomach growls, reminding you that lunch was several lifetimes ago and consisted mainly of hallucinogenic honey and existential dread. Maybe the market will have something to quiet your hunger that doesn't involve insects or altered consciousness. The market sprawls across a limestone plaza like a living organism, pulsing with activity, arguments, and the occasional arrest. Merchants have laid out their wares on woven mats, creating a maze of commerce that follows no logical pattern you can discern. The organization seems to be based on some combination of social status, astronomical significance, and whoever showed up first with the biggest stick. You pass the pottery section, where a woman demonstrates the durability of her water jugs by standing on them. This would be more impressive if Maya pottery wasn't famously fragile. And indeed, one jug explodes under her weight in a shower of terracotta shrapnel. She smoothly transitions this disaster into a sales pitch about how the breaking pattern predicts good fortune, which is the kind of quick thinking you have to admire. The obsidian merchants occupy a prime spot near the plaza's center, their volcanic glass blades gleaming like frozen midnight. One merchant demonstrates his wares by shaving a volunteer's arm. The blade so sharp, it removes hair without touching skin, of course. He then accidentally nicks the volunteer, drawing blood, because nothing sells Maya cutlery like a live demonstration of its flesh-parting capabilities. But it's the crowd gathered near the plaza's eastern edge that catches your attention. The sounds coming from that direction, a mixture of sobbing, haggling, and what might be an auctioneer's chant, tell you exactly what kind of commerce is happening there. The slave market is in full swing. You approach with the kind of morbid curiosity that makes people slow down at accident scenes. The slaves stand on a raised platform, their conditions ranging from recently captured and still defiant to broken and staring at nothing. The Maya practiced slavery with the same casual efficiency they brought to architecture and astronomy, treating human beings as another commodity to be traded, though historians still debate the exact legal status and rights, if any, of enslaved people in Maya society. Fresh from the eastern raids, shouts a merchant who looks like he styles his hair with rendered human fat. Strong backs for fieldwork, skilled weavers, children young enough to train for any task. The children are the hardest to look at. Some are war orphans, others were sold by their own families to pay debts, and a few are there because their parents committed crimes and Maya justice believed in inherited guilt. They stand in small clusters, holding hands when the merchants aren't actively separating them for individual display. An elderly woman is examining a young girl's teeth with the same critical eye you'd use for buying a horse. "Can she grind corn?" she asks. "My last slave girl developed arthritis after only 3 seasons. Completely useless. Had to sell her to the priest for ceremony work." The casual mention of ceremony work, aka human sacrifice, makes your skin crawl. But this is normal market conversation, as routine as complaining about produce prices. The girl being examined, maybe 8 years old, stands perfectly still while strangers debate her value in cacao beans. The going rate seems to be about 100 beans for a child, 300 for a skilled adult, more if they have specialized knowledge like writing or advanced weaving techniques. 20 beans off if you buy the matching set, another merchant offers, gesturing to what are obviously siblings trying not to cry as they're displayed like livestock. They work better together, less likely to run away if they have family to worry about. The psychology of slave management, Maya style. Keep families together, not out of compassion, but because emotional bonds make better chains than iron ones. It's efficiently cruel in a way that makes your stomach turn, even as you recognize the horrible logic of it. A commotion breaks out near the male slaves. One of them, a warrior based on his scarification patterns, has apparently decided he's not going quietly into servitude. He headbutts a prospective buyer, sending the man sprawling into a display of cacao beans that scatter across the plaza like the world's most expensive marbles. The warrior gets exactly 3 seconds of satisfaction before several guards converge on him with clubs. The beating is swift, professional, and public. The message is clear. Resistance is painful and futile. Other slaves watch with expressions ranging from sympathy to relief, that it's not them to careful blankness that reveals nothing. The warrior is dragged away, probably to be made an example of in ways that will discourage future rebellion. You notice one of your neighbors from the farming district examining a middle-aged man who claims to know how to read and write. Literacy is rare and valuable, worth the extra cacao beans if true. The neighbor produces a piece of bark paper with some glyphs, and the slave reads it fluently, even adding commentary about the scribe's poor handwriting. He's purchased immediately for what sounds like a small fortune, 500 cacao beans plus a jade bead. As darkness begins to settle over the market plaza like a suffocating blanket, you realize you need to head home before the evening social obligations begin. In your world, evening social events might involve Netflix and avoiding eye contact with neighbors. Here, they involve blood, pain, and the kind of peer pressure that makes modern social media look benign. You arrive at your neighborhood's common area just as preparations for tonight's bloodletting ceremony are beginning, because apparently, the Maya believed that if a day passed without someone, somewhere, offering blood to the gods, the universe would collapse like a cosmic house of cards. The fact that you already bled for the maize this morning doesn't count. That was agricultural blood. This is social blood. Totally different. Your wife is already there, chatting with other women while preparing the ceremonial implements. And by implements, I mean a collection of torture devices that would make a medieval dungeon master whistle in appreciation. Stingray spines, obsidian blades, thorned ropes, and what looks disturbingly like a cactus needle the length of your forearm. The priest says tonight we honor Ixchel. She informs you, naming the goddess of medicine, childbirth, and weaving. You'd think a goddess of medicine would be into healing, not hurting, but Maya logic operates on principles that make quantum physics look straightforward. The women will pierce their tongues, the men, well, she gestures delicately downward, and your entire body tries to retreat into itself like a turtle sensing danger. Yes, the Maya believed that the most powerful blood came from the most sensitive areas, and for men, that meant exactly what you're horrified to realize it means. Your penis has suddenly become very aware of its vulnerability and is attempting to file for conscientious objector status. The neighborhood priest arrives, dressed in a costume that looks like what would happen if a leopard mated with a craft store explosion. Feathers, fur, jade, and what are definitely human finger bones create an ensemble that rustles ominously with each movement. His face is painted with symbols that probably mean something profound, but currently just remind you of a very aggressive makeover. The god's thirst, he announces, which is the Maya equivalent of, let's get this party started. He produces a bark paper painted with the image of a serpent. Tonight, we feed the vision serpent with our essence, that it might carry our prayers to the celestial realm. The vision serpent. Because regular serpents aren't terrifying enough. The Maya had to invent a cosmic one that appears in clouds of blood loss-induced hallucinations. Historians still debate whether the vision serpent visions were purely from blood loss, or if the thorns and spines were coated with psychoactive substances. Either way, you're about to find out. The women go first, which in any other context might seem chivalrous, but here just means they're demonstrating proper technique for self-mutilation. Your wife kneels before the priest, who hands her a thorned rope. She opens her mouth, extends her tongue, and you have to look away as she drives the thorns through the tender flesh. Blood immediately flows, dripping onto bark paper positioned to catch every sacred drop. Other women follow suit, some using stingray spines, others obsidian blades. The sound of soft gasps and muffled whimpers fills the air, but no one screams. Screaming would suggest unwillingness, and unwilling blood is worthless blood in the cosmic economy. The blood-soaked papers will be burned later, the smoke carrying the offerings to the gods who apparently can't get their own snacks. Then it's the men's turn. Your bowels, already questionable from a diet of corn and anxiety, threaten immediate evacuation. The priest produces a spine that looks like it was designed by someone who really hated human anatomy. Other men are already beginning their offerings, and the sounds they make, somewhere between a groan and a prayer, will haunt your dreams forever. For fertility and rain, the priest intones, handing you the spine. It's surprisingly heavy, still carrying the faint smell of the ocean from its stingray origin. The spine has been carved with tiny glyphs that probably say something inspiring, but might just as easily read "Abandon hope. All ye who pierce here." You position yourself, trying to find a comfortable way to perform an inherently uncomfortable act. There is no comfortable way. The Maya knew this. They probably considered the discomfort part of the offering. You take a breath, grip the spine, and the pain is exquisite, transcendent, the kind that makes you understand why the Maya associated bloodletting with divine visions. Stars explode behind your eyelids. The universe contracts to a single point of agony, then expands into fractal patterns that might be the gods acknowledging your offering, or might just be your brain's way of coping with what you're doing to yourself. Blood flows, and you carefully direct it onto the waiting bark paper. The priest nods approvingly. Apparently, you're bleeding correctly, which is not a skill you ever thought you'd develop. Around you, other men perform their own offerings with varying degrees of stoicism. One young man, probably at his first adult ceremony, faints dead away, which would be embarrassing if everyone wasn't too focused on their own genital trauma to notice. The vision serpent comes, the priest announces, and sure enough, the smoke from the burning blood papers does seem to writhe in serpentine patterns. Of course, you've lost enough blood that a regular garden hose would probably look mystical right now. The smoke forms coils and spirals that definitely aren't just your oxygen-deprived brain making patterns out of randomness. That shape is clearly a serpent, with feathers, descending from the sky, speaking in colors that taste like mathematics. The bloodletting ceremony finally ends when the last of the bark papers burns to ash, carrying your collective suffering to gods who apparently have very specific dietary requirements. You stumble home, walking somewhat bow-legged from your self-inflicted wound, while your wife dabs at her still bleeding tongue with a cloth that's seen too many similar ceremonies. Back at your hut, the evening meal preparations begin, though meal might be too generous a term for what's about to happen. Your wife, despite having a freshly perforated tongue, starts preparing dinner with the determination of someone who knows that skipping meals in this calorie-scarce environment means watching your children's ribs become progressively more countable. "We have guests tonight," she manages to say, though the words come out thick and slurred. Guests, because after a day of farming, rubber collecting, watching death sports, visiting slave markets, and genital perforation, what you really need is to entertain. The guests in question are your wife's recently deceased father and your own grandmother who passed during last year's drought. No, not their memories or spirits in some metaphorical sense. The actual deceased, or at least parts of them, will be joining you for dinner in the Maya tradition of ancestor veneration that makes modern Day of the Dead celebrations look like casual acquaintance meetups. Your wife unwraps a bundle from the corner where it's been stored in the family shrine. Inside, wrapped in jade green cloth, is her father's skull, polished and decorated with red cinnabar paint in swirling patterns. His empty eye sockets have been filled with jade discs that catch the firelight in a way that's either deeply meaningful or deeply disturbing, depending on your cultural perspective. "Father's hungry," she says matter-of-factly, setting the skull at the place of honor near the fire. From another bundle, she produces your grandmother's femur, carved with intricate designs that tell the story of her life, her marriage, the birth of her children, her skill at weaving, and her death from what the glyphs delicately refer to as the fever that makes the body consume itself, which was probably tuberculosis, but could have been any number of diseases that made life expectancy here about as optimistic as a Chicago Cubs fan before 2016. The Maya practiced secondary burial, where bodies were first interred, then exhumed after the flesh decomposed, and the bones cleaned and kept by the family. Historians still debate whether this was purely religious or if the practical benefits of not having decomposing corpses in the tropical heat played a role. Either way, Grandma's femur is now a dinner guest, and you're expected to treat it with the same courtesy you'd show a living relative. You help set up the dinner mat, placing bowls of food before each ancestral remain. The irony of offering food to people who no longer have digestive systems is not lost on you. But pointing this out would be like questioning communion wine at a Catholic Mass. Technically logical, but missing the entire spiritual point. Your children emerge from where they've been playing, and 5-year-old son immediately runs to his grandfather's skull. "Abuelo," he exclaims, patting the cranium with sticky hands that leave small fingerprints in the cinnabar paint. In your world, this would require immediate therapy. Here, it's Tuesday. "Tell grandfather about your day," your wife encourages, and your son launches into a rambling story about catching a lizard that might have been an incarnation of Itzamna, the creator deity, or might have just been a regular lizard. It's hard to tell when everything in Maya cosmology can potentially be a god in disguise. The actual living dinner guests arrive as darkness fully claims the sky. Your wife's sister and her husband, carrying their own ancestral bundles because apparently it's BYOD, bring your own dead, night. They also bring their infant daughter, whose head is currently bound between boards to achieve the elongated skull shape the Maya consider beautiful. The baby seems remarkably unbothered by having her cranium slowly reshaped, though that might be because she's too young to realize this isn't normal. Mother sends her regrets, your sister-in-law says, unwrapping what appears to be an entire rib cage, but she sent Uncle instead. Uncle's ribs are arranged on the mat like the world's most macabre place setting. You notice one rib is missing, probably ended up in someone's ceremonial costume or ground into medicine. Waste not, want not, even when it comes to deceased relatives. The meal begins with a prayer to the ancestors, asking them to intercede with the gods on behalf of the living. Your brother-in-law, who's had a few too many gourds of pulque before arriving, starts telling the bones about his financial troubles, asking his deceased uncle to speak to the lords of the underworld about improving his cacao bean situation. It's like praying for a raise. If your prayer recipients were actively decomposing at your dinner table, the food itself is the usual suspects: corn in various forms, beans that have been boiled into submission, and a special treat of iguana eggs that your wife must have traded something valuable for. The living eat while making sure to place small portions near the ancestral remains. Your son helpfully tries to feed his grandfather's skull, pushing corn mush into its nasal cavity with the determination of a child who hasn't quite grasped the concept of death. Grandmother always loved this dish. You mention placing a portion near the femur. It's weirdly comforting, this presence of the dead among the living. In your time, death is hidden away, sanitized, discussed in hushed tones. Here, it's literally at your dinner table, being told about your day and having food offerings made to it. There's something almost healthy about this matter-of-fact acceptance that dead relatives are still relatives, just in a different state of being. As the dinner winds down and your son finally stops trying to force-feed corn mush to his grandfather's skull, your brother-in-law produces something that makes the entire evening take a decidedly darker turn. From his carrying pouch, he pulls out a small codex, a bark paper book that unfolds accordion style to reveal page after page of intricate glyphs and disturbing illustrations. "Just received this from the priests," he says with the casual tone of someone sharing a weather report, rather than what's essentially an illustrated guide to cosmic horror. New stories about the gods to teach the children. Bedtime stories. In your world, these involve friendly bears learning about sharing, or maybe a mouse going on a mild adventure. In the Maya world, bedtime stories are the kind of content that would get a modern publisher investigated for psychological child endangerment. He begins reading, and even though your classical Mayan is rusty, the illustrations help fill in the gaps. The first story is about Geep Totek, our Lord the Flayed One, a god who proves his dedication to agricultural renewal by literally wearing a freshly flayed human skin as a suit. The illustrations show this in loving detail, the way the skin hangs loose at the joints, how the god's own face peers through the empty eye holes of his flesh costume, the artistic flourish of fingernails dangling from what are essentially skin gloves. And so, your brother-in-law reads with the enthusiasm of someone who doesn't find this remotely disturbing. Saip Totek teaches us that renewal requires sacrifice, that the old skin must be shed for the new harvest to grow. Children, what do we learn from this? Your son, who's been listening with rapt attention, raises his hand. We should take our skin off to help the corn grow. No. Your sister-in-law corrects gently. The priests do that for us. We just have to appreciate their sacrifice. Oh, good. The moral of the story is to be grateful that professional skin removers handle this task so children don't have to. That's definitely better. The next page shows priests wearing these flayed skins during 20-day festivals. The decomposing flesh suits somehow considered the height of religious fashion. The second story involves Kamazots, the death bat god who lives in a house of darkness filled with shrieking bats. The illustration shows him with a human body, but a bat's head, holding what appears to be a severed human head, like a casual accessory. According to the story, he challenges travelers to spend the night in his house, where they must avoid multiple forms of death, including obsidian knives that fly through the air seeking flesh, and jaguars made of shadows that eat sound. This teaches vigilance. your brother-in-law explains to the assembled children, who are starting to look less sleepy and more traumatized. Always be alert, because death comes in many forms. Your 3-year-old daughter starts crying, probably because she's smart enough to realize that death bats and good night, sleep tight, are mutually exclusive concepts. Your wife soothes her with the Maya equivalent of comfort. Don't worry, little one. Camazotz only takes the heads of those who fall asleep without saying their prayers. You always say your prayers, don't you? The threat-based comfort seems to work, or at least stops the crying in favor of wide-eyed terror, which is apparently an acceptable bedtime emotion here. The stories continue, each more disturbing than the last. There's the tale of the goddess Ishil in her destroyer aspect, sending floods to drown humanity because they forgot to honor her properly. The illustration shows people clinging to trees as crocodiles wait below, which is probably not the image you want in your head when you live in a flood-prone river valley. Then there's the hero twins' journey through Xibalba, the underworld, where they face challenges like the House of Cold, where they must survive freezing temperatures, and the House of Jaguars, where they must outwit hungry cats. Your son particularly enjoys the part where the twins trick the lords of death into killing themselves, though you notice he's now eyeing the darkness outside your hut with considerably more suspicion. My favorite, your brother-in-law announces, turning to a page that makes everyone lean in despite themselves, is the story of the Awizotl. The illustration shows what appears to be a dog-sized creature with human hands at the end of its tail, lurking in a river, according to the story. This charming creature drowns people by grabbing them with its tail hand and dragging them underwater, where it proceeds to eat their eyes, teeth, and nails, leaving the rest of the body to float to the surface days later. If you see a corpse missing only these parts, he reads cheerfully, you know the Awizotl has fed. The priests say this teaches us to stay away from strange waters and to always travel in groups. Your daughter asks the question everyone's thinking, but what if it comes to our canal? Then we hope it's already eaten. Your wife says practically, the Awizotl only hunts when hungry. That's why we throw food offerings into the water during the dry season. This sparks a lively family discussion about which neighbors would make the best Awizotl bait, which is apparently normal dinner conversation when your bedtime stories include aquatic horror monsters with handtails. The Codex's final story is about the death god's constant hunger for human hearts, beautifully illustrated with a pyramid of freshly extracted organs. The moral seems to be that sacrifice maintains cosmic order, and children should be grateful that priests handle this messy business of feeding the gods. It's like teaching kids about where their food comes from. If their food was human hearts and the farmers were priests with obsidian knives, the storytelling session finally ends when your youngest falls asleep mid-scream during a particularly vivid description of how the underworld lords play ball with human heads. Your brother-in-law carefully folds up his nightmare codex, and the evening guests prepare to leave, wrapping up their ancestral remains like the world's most disturbing leftovers. Same time next month? Your sister-in-law asks, cradling her uncle's ribcage with the same care you'd use for fine china. Mother said she'll try to make it if her arthritis improves. You nod, already dreading another evening of dinner with the decomposed, and help them carry their bundles to the door. The baby with the bound head is sleeping peacefully, apparently having adapted to her cranial modification with the resilience only infants possess. Or maybe having your skull slowly reshaped just puts everything else in perspective. After they leave, you and your wife begin the nighttime routine of securing your hut against the various things that go bump, slash, and devour in the night. She carefully rewraps her father's skull and your grandmother's femur, placing them back in the family shrine with offerings of corn and water for their journey back to the underworld, because apparently, even dead relatives need snacks for the commute. I need to visit the facilities, you announce, using the Maya euphemism for what your body desperately needs to do after a day of fear, blood loss, and questionable dietary choices. Your wife hands you a torch and a stick, both essential tools for nighttime bathroom visits in a world where indoor plumbing is about as real as peaceful death. The communal latrine is a short but terrifying walk from your hut. The Maya, to their credit, understood basic sanitation and built their latrines away from living areas, positioning them over natural drainage that carried waste away during the rainy season. What they didn't account for was the various creatures that viewed these waste channels as all-you-can-eat buffets. You pick your way carefully along the path, torch held high, stick ready to defend against anything that might view you as dessert rather than dinner guest. The night sounds of the jungle press in from all sides, chittering, howling, rustling, and the occasional scream that could be a bird, a dying animal, or your neighbor encountering something unfortunate. The latrine structure looms ahead, a simple palm-thatched shelter over a stone platform with strategically placed holes. The smell hits you before you get there, a mixture of human waste, lime, used to control odor and decomposition, and the musky scent of the various creatures that lurk beneath. You approach cautiously, remembering the stories. Not the mythology about underworld monsters, but the actual, verified accounts of people encountering very real snakes in very vulnerable moments. The fer de lance, which the Maya call yellow jaw, has a charming habit of hunting in waste channels where it waits for rats, bats, and the occasional human posterior to present itself. Tapping the ground with your stick, the universal Maya signal for, "Please don't bite me, I'm just here to poop." You peer into the latrine hole. Your torch illuminates nothing immediately threatening, just the glistening surface of the waste channel below. Still, you perform your business with the speed of someone who's heard too many stories about snake bites in unfortunate places. A rustling from the corner of the shelter makes you freeze midstream. Your torch swings toward the sound, revealing a possum the size of a house cat regarding you with eyes that reflect the light like demonic mirrors. It's probably just here for the insects, but in your current vulnerable position, it might as well be a jaguar. The possum hisses, showing more teeth than seems reasonable for something that size, and you respond with what you hope is an intimidating grunt, but probably sounds more like a whimper. This is your life now. Territorial disputes with marsupials while your loincloth is around your ankles. Business finally concluded. You begin the careful walk back, only to freeze as your torch illuminates something that makes your blood turn to ice water. There, directly on the path between you and safety, is a snake. Not just any snake. A fer de lance as thick as your arm and long enough that both ends disappear into the darkness beyond your torch's reach. The snake regards you with the patient interest of something that knows it holds all the cards. Its head rises slightly, tongue flicking out to taste your fear, which at this point must be seasoning the entire atmosphere. You remember the advice given to all Maya children. Don't run. It triggers their hunting instinct. Don't attack. They're faster than you. And definitely don't try to jump over them. They can strike up to 2/3 of their body length. So you do the only thing you can. You wait. The snake, perhaps deciding you're too large to eat and too pathetic to bother with, eventually slithers off into the undergrowth with a casual indifference that's somehow more insulting than aggression. You wait another full minute before sprinting back to your hut with the grace of someone whose forgotten dignity exists. "Snake?" your wife asks as you burst through the doorway, panting. "Big one," you confirm, trying to slow your hammering heart. She nods sympathetically. "Third one this week. The rains are driving them to higher ground. Did you remember to thank it for not biting you?" Thank it. You were too busy trying not to soil yourself a second time. But apparently, Maya etiquette requires gratitude even toward creatures that could kill you, because they chose not to. It's like sending a thank you note to someone for not murdering you, polite, but highlighting a disturbing dynamic. You finally settle onto your sleeping mat, every muscle aching from the day's exertions, your various wounds throbbing in rhythm with your heartbeat. The night sounds of the jungle create a symphony of potential threats. Every rustle could be a jaguar. Every scratch could be a snake. Every weird gurgle could be your neighbor's digestive system, or something far more sinister. Your wife lies beside you, already drifting off despite her perforated tongue and the various anxieties that come with Maya existence. She's adapted to this life in a way you're still struggling with, able to find sleep, even knowing that tomorrow brings another round of backbreaking labor, blood sacrifice, and creative ways the universe might try to kill you. But sleep doesn't come easily when you're lying on a thin mat over packed dirt, sweating in the humid night air while trying not to think about what might be crawling through the gaps in your walls. Your neighbor's new baby is crying, not unusual. Except this crying has the peculiar pitch of an infant whose skull is being actively reshaped between boards. The Maya practice of cranial modification starts shortly after birth, when the bones are still soft. 2 boards are bound to the infant's head, one against the forehead, one against the back, and gradually tightened over months to create the elongated skull shape that marks nobility and beauty. Historians still debate whether this caused brain damage or just looked really uncomfortable. Judging by the baby's screams, it's definitely the latter and possibly the former. "The gods appreciate proper skull shape," your wife mumbles sleepily when you shift restlessly at the sound. Little Itzel will thank her parents when she's older, or she'll have chronic headaches and a deep-seated resentment toward her parents, but pointing this out seems culturally insensitive. Besides, who are you to judge? You voluntarily pierced your own genitals earlier today to feed an invisible snake made of smoke, glass houses and all that. The crying eventually stops, replaced by the sound of your other neighbor engaged in what can politely be called marital activities, but sounds more like someone being murdered with enthusiasm. The thin walls of Maya huts offer about as much privacy as a beaded curtain, meaning everyone in the neighborhood is now unwilling participants in whatever fertility ritual is happening next door. This triggers a cascade of similar activities throughout the compound, because apparently the Maya treat reproduction like a competitive sport. Soon the night is filled with sounds that would make a modern apartment complex blush, all while various family members pretend to sleep through it. Your 5-year-old son chooses this moment to ask, "What's that noise, Papa?" The neighbors are praying. You manage, very enthusiastically, "To which god?" "Ixchel," you say, naming the goddess of fertility, which is technically accurate even if it's not the whole truth. "Oh," he says, apparently satisfied. "Should we pray too?" "We prayed enough today." You assure him, thinking of your still sore penis and your wife's wounded tongue. Some nights, the gods can manage without additional offerings. A new sound joins the nocturnal symphony, the distinctive splash of something large entering the canal near your hut. Could be a crocodile hunting, could be a tapir coming for a drink, could be the Awizotl, that charming creature with human hands on its tail, looking for someone to drag underwater and selectively nibble. You lie very still, as if the creature could somehow sense movement through walls and across 20 yards of space. The splashing continues, accompanied by what sounds like chewing. Probably just a crocodile with a fish. Definitely not a mythological monster eating someone's eyes and fingernails. The fact that you can't be entirely sure which it is says everything about life in a Maya city. "Stop thinking so loud," your wife mutters. "You're keeping the ancestors awake." You glance toward the family shrine where her father's skull and your grandmother's femur rest in their wrappings. Can the dead lose sleep? It seems like the kind of philosophical question that Maya priests would spend decades debating, while everyone else just accepts it as fact and moves on with their lives. The night wears on, marked by the occasional scream. Could be a bird, could be a human sacrifice, could be someone stepping on something sharp in the dark. Splash, crocodile, probably, and the ever-present drone of insects that view your blood as a gourmet meal. You drift in and out of fitful sleep, dreaming of rubber balls that turn into severed heads, of jaguars wearing your supervisor's face, of trying to explain to Gib Totek why you can't attend his skin-wearing festival due to a previous commitment. Around what must be midnight, though without clocks, time is more of a suggestion than a measurement. You're jolted awake by a sound that makes every hair on your body stand at attention. It's a cough, but not a human cough. It's the deep, guttural sound of a jaguar, and it's close, very close, possibly right outside your hut close. Your wife is awake now too, her hand finding yours in the darkness. You both lie frozen, barely breathing, as padded feet circle your hut. The walls that seemed so flimsy before now seem like tissue paper, offering all the protection of a strong wish against 200 pounds of divine predator. The jaguar pauses at what must be your doorway. You can hear it breathing, a deep rumble that vibrates through the ground and into your bones. In Maya belief, jaguars are sacred, divine messengers who can cross between the world of the living and the dead. They're also apex predators with a bite force that can crack skulls like eggs. Theology and threat combine in one spotted package, currently deciding whether you're worth the effort. The jaguar's breathing continues for what feels like hours, but is probably only minutes. Time has a way of stretching when death is sniffing at your door. Then, miraculously, the footsteps pad away, heading toward the jungle. You and your wife remain frozen for another eternity before finally allowing yourselves to exhale. "It's a sign," she whispers. "The jaguar spirit visited but didn't enter. Something important will happen tomorrow." In your world, a predator casing your house would be cause for calling animal control. Here, it's a divine message requiring interpretation. You're too exhausted and terrified to argue about whether nearly being eaten counts as a spiritual experience. Dawn can't come soon enough. But when it finally does, arriving with the familiar thunder of temple drums, you almost wish for more sleep. Your body protests as you rise. Everything hurts from yesterday's exertions, and the day ahead promises only more of the same. But staying in bed isn't an option when the alternative might be volunteering for sacrifice duty. At the morning meal, the atmosphere is different. News travels fast in a Maya city, carried on the wings of gossip and the feet of early rising merchants. Your supervisor arrives at the communal cooking area with an expression that makes your stomach drop faster than a sacrificial victim from a temple top. "The rains haven't come," he announces to the gathered farmers. "The Ahor has consulted the calendars and the stars. The gods are displeased." everyone knows what this means. When the rains fail, the gods demand payment. Not just everyday blood from earlobes and tongues, but the premium stuff, whole human lives offered up to convince the sky to open. The question is, who will be chosen to make this ultimate donation to cosmic stability? The priests have decreed, your supervisor continues, clearly enjoying his moment of power, that each district must provide one family member for the great ceremony. The selection will be made by noon. The communal area erupts in barely controlled panic, disguised as religious fervor. Everyone suddenly becomes extremely devoted, praising the gods, offering extra blood from their already scarred earlobes, trying to demonstrate their value to the community in ways that don't involve having their hearts removed. Your wife grabs your arm. Your cousin is a scribe. Maybe he could. Scribes are valuable. You cut her off. They never get chosen. It's true. The Maya might be casual about human sacrifice, but they're not stupid. You don't sacrifice the people who know how to write, do complex mathematics, or predict eclipses. You sacrifice the expendable ones, the farmers who can be replaced, the war captives no one will miss, the volunteers who've been convinced that feeding the gods is a fast track to paradise. The morning's work proceeds with everyone trying to look simultaneously indispensable and invisible. You attack the maize fields with newfound enthusiasm, hoping that exceptional agricultural dedication might save you from becoming fertilizer yourself. Other farmers have the same idea, creating a bizarre competition of who can look most essential to food production. Your supervisor walks among the workers like a vulture counting chickens. He makes marks on his bark paper, consulting with the priest who's come to observe the selection process. The priest is dressed in his full regalia, jaguar pelt, quetzal feathers, and enough jade to fund a small war. His face is painted with symbols that probably mean something profound, but currently just look like cosmic death warrants. You, the priest points at a young man who made the mistake of taking a water break. Come forward. The chosen farmer, barely 18, with the kind of face that suggests life hasn't completely crushed his optimism yet, steps forward with legs that visibly shake. His mother, working nearby, lets out a sound that's part wail, part prayer, wholly heartbreaking. Wait. The young man's father steps forward. Take me instead. I've lived my years. My son has children to raise. The priest considers this with the air of someone deciding between menu items, age, health, family status, all factors in the complex calculus of human sacrifice. The Maya prefer their offerings young and healthy. But voluntary substitution carries its own spiritual weight. The old for the young, the priest muses. Very well. The gods appreciate willing blood. And just like that, a man's life is traded like a commodity. The father embraces his son, whispers something that makes the young man sob, then walks to join the other selected sacrifices with the dignity of someone who's made peace with feeding the divine appetite. Your relief at not being chosen is immediately tainted by guilt. You're grateful it's not you, not your family. But that gratitude comes at the cost of watching neighbors prepare for death. It's survivor's guilt, Maya style, where surviving means watching others take your place on the altar. The selected victims are led away to begin their preparation. They'll be bathed, dressed in fine clothes, fed delicacies, treated like honored guests at their own execution. The Maya believe in sending their human offerings to the gods in style, like dressing up a gift before wrapping it. Your supervisor claps his hands, ending the morning's drama. Back to work. The corn won't grow itself, and we'll need extra for the feast after the ceremony. The feast. because nothing says successful human sacrifice like a community barbecue afterward. You return to your plot, trying not to think about how the fields you're tending will be fertilized with the ashes of people you know. The cycle of life and death in Maya agriculture is more literal than most cultures prefer. As you work, you overhear discussions about the ceremony. It will be elaborate. Heart extraction at the temple summit. Blood painted on the idol of Chak, the rain god. Bodies tumbled down the pyramid steps in a divine cascade. If the gods are properly impressed, the rains will come. If not, well, there are always more farmers. The day of sacrifice arrives with a sunrise that paints the sky in shades of blood, either a poetic coincidence or the gods setting the mood for what's to come. The entire city is required to attend, because apparently watching your neighbors get their hearts ripped out is considered a community bonding experience. You dress in your finest clothes, which means your least stained loincloth and a mantle that only has minor tears, and join the procession heading toward the main temple. The pyramid looms before you, its limestone steps already crowded with spectators jockeying for the best view of the upcoming carnage. The Maya built their temples tall, not just to get closer to the gods, but to ensure everyone could see the sacrifices. It's architectural design with a purpose. Witness the consequences of cosmic imbalance and be grateful it's not you up there. Your family finds a spot midway up the steps, close enough to see clearly, but far enough to avoid the splash zone. Yes, there's a splash zone. The priests are very enthusiastic about their work, and arterial spray has surprising range when you're working at altitude. The ceremony begins with enough pageantry to make a Broadway production look understated. Priests in elaborate costumes that combine feathers, jade, and what are definitely human skin components parade around the temple summit. Musicians play drums made from human skulls, flutes carved from leg bones, and rattles filled with teeth. It's like a death metal concert, where the death part is literal. The first victim is led forward, the father who volunteered to save his son. He's been transformed from a simple farmer into a divine offering. His body is painted blue, the sacred color of sacrifice. Paper ornaments flutter from his arms and legs. A headdress of flowers and feathers makes him look like a tropical bird prepared for the world's worst migration. The head priest raises an obsidian knife that catches the morning sun like frozen midnight. The blade is so sharp it could split a hair, divide a thought, separate a soul from its body with surgical precision, which is exactly what it's about to do. For Chak, Lord of Rain, the priest shouts, we offer this willing heart that the skies might open. 4 assistant priests grab the victim's limbs, bending him backward over the sacrificial stone until his chest arches toward the sky like an offering plate. He doesn't struggle, whether from drugs, religious ecstasy, or simple resignation. You can't tell. His eyes are fixed on something beyond the physical world, already seeing whatever comes next. The knife descends. The priest's hand plunges into the chest cavity with practiced ease, emerging with a still beating heart that he raises toward the sun. The crowd roars approval, not bloodthirsty exactly, but appreciative of a sacrifice well performed. It's like applauding a particularly good guitar solo. If guitars were made of human organs, the body is rolled down the pyramid steps, tumbling in a cascade of blue paint and blood that leaves marks on the limestone. At the bottom, ritual specialists wait to process the corpse according to strict religious protocols. The head will join the skull rack. The heart will be burned for the gods. The blood will anoint the temple. The flesh, well, There are reasons the Maya word for human meat translates as food of the gods, and it's not entirely metaphorical. More victims follow. A young woman who walks to her death with the grace of a dancer, a war captive who spits defiance until the very end, an elderly priest who volunteers himself with the air of someone keeping an appointment they've long expected. Each death is precisely choreographed, a ritual performance that blends theatre and theology in the bloodiest possible way. Your son watches with wide eyes, occasionally asking questions that you struggle to answer. Why does the heart keep moving after it's out? Where does their breath go? Will they be happy in the underworld? You provide the standard theological responses about feeding the gods and maintaining cosmic balance. But part of you wonders if you're just perpetuating a cycle of normalized horror. As the ceremony continues, the sky does begin to darken. Clouds gather on the horizon like divine spectators arriving late to the show. The crowd murmurs excitedly. Is it working? Are the gods responding? Or is this just coincidental weather that would have happened anyway? The head priest, apparently deciding to capitalize on the meteorological momentum, calls for the special finale. A young noble, volunteered by his family for the honor of divine consumption, is brought forward. He's been drugged with enough hallucinogens to see the gods personally, swaying slightly as reality and divinity blur together in his consciousness. This sacrifice is different. Instead of just the heart extraction, the priests perform the full ceremony. First, the heart, still beating, is placed in a ceremonial bowl. Then the head is removed with a flint saw, a process that takes longer than you'd expect and sounds like someone cutting through a wet tree branch. Finally, the skin is carefully peeled off to be worn by priests in future ceremonies. You want to look away but can't. This is your reality, your religion, your community's solution to agricultural uncertainty. In your time, people pray for rain or seed clouds. Here, they offer up their neighbors and call it divine necessity. Thunder rumbles overhead. The first drops of rain begin to fall, mixing with the blood on the temple steps to create pink rivulets that flow down like diluted horror. The crowd cheers. The sacrifice is worked. The gods are pleased. The crops will grow as you help your family navigate the rain-slick steps, avoiding the parts made treacherous by blood and other fluids. Your wife squeezes your hand. We survived another season, she says quietly. That's what it comes down to in the end. Not living, but surviving. Making it through another day, another ceremony, another close call with becoming part of the divine food chain. Tomorrow, you'll return to the fields, plant the corn, and try not to think about whose ashes are enriching the soil. But tonight, as the rain falls and washes away the blood, you're simply grateful to still have your heart beating inside your chest where it belongs. As the rain continues to fall, mixing with the sacrificial blood to create rivulets of pink water cascading down the temple steps, you and your family make your way home through streets that have transformed into muddy streams. The ceremony is over. The gods are fed. And life, such as it is, continues for those who still possess their hearts. Back in your hut, you all sit in exhausted silence, listening to the rain drum against the thatched roof. Your son curls against his mother, processing what he's witnessed in the way children do, accepting the incomprehensible as normal because he's never known anything different. Your daughter sleeps fitfully, occasionally whimpering from dreams that probably feature rather more beating hearts and rolling heads than ideal for a 3-year-old. The rain that the sacrifices brought falls steadily now, a gentle rhythm that should be comforting, but carries the weight of what it cost. Each drop represents someone's father, mother, child. Lives traded for agricultural productivity in the cosmic marketplace where human hearts are currency and the gods are always hungry. Your wife begins preparing the evening meal in silence. There's dried fish tonight, traded from a merchant before the ceremony, and the inevitable corn prepared with extra care as if to honor those who died to water it. You help where you can, your movements automatic, both of you avoiding discussion of what you've seen. Some things are too heavy for words, too normal to need commenting on, too terrible to examine closely. As darkness falls, the rain continues its percussion against the roof, a liquid lullaby that slowly soothes the day's sharp edges. The jungle sounds are muted tonight, as if even the animals understand that something significant has transpired. Or perhaps they're simply sheltering from the rain, living their lives with the simple wisdom of creatures who don't sacrifice their own to change the weather. You lie on your mat, your wife beside you, children between you, and listen to the rain that blood has purchased. Tomorrow will bring more of the same: work, worry, the constant navigation between survival and sacrifice. But tonight, in this moment, you're alive, whole, together. Your heart beats steadily in your chest, pumping blood through your own body rather than feeding distant gods. The fire dies to embers, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Somewhere in the city, families mourn those they've lost to divine appetite. Somewhere else, priests calculate whether today's offering will suffice or if the gods will demand more. But here, in your small hut with its gaps in the walls and its mats on the floor, you drift towards sleep with the profound gratitude of those who've survived another day in paradise, Maya style. Your breathing slows, matching the rhythm of the rain. Your consciousness fades like smoke dissipating into darkness. And in this place where life is cheap and death is currency, where beauty and horror dance together like lovers, where gods feast on human hearts and humans feast on whatever they can find, you sleep, because tomorrow the drums will sound again, the sun will rise on more beauty and brutality, and you'll need your strength to face another day of just trying to make it through. The rain continues to fall, washing blood from temple stones, nourishing the earth that nourishes the corn that nourishes the people who nourish the gods. The cycle continues, eternal and inexorable, and you sleep, grateful to still be part of it rather than fuel for it. Sweet dreams, if you can manage them.